You want to use the prime. Let's conclude the hour then with this conversation. There is growing outrage over Eskom's proposed 36% electricity tariff hike for next year. Many are calling for the National Energy Regulator of South Africa to reject this request as cash-strapped consumers battle with the high living costs. Nersa's decision is expected in December. Let's speak now to Nersa's acting executive for electricity, Mr. Welile Mkhize. Mr. Mkhize, good evening to you and thank you for your time. Very briefly, you and I don't have much time. What justification has Eskom given you for the increase that they are looking for? What are the cost drivers?
Well, thank you, Toli, for having us tonight. I think this is an important subject to discuss at this point in time. Yes, Eskom has submitted an application to Nersa on the 16th of August of last month. And as you have pointed out, indeed, the cost drivers mainly for Eskom is primary energy. It also remains the IPP costs. Diesel, indeed, has been quite a large cost item. But as you have noticed that with the decrease in load shedding this financial year, the cost of running OCGTs that work on diesel has decreased significantly. In fact, from the 1st of April, starting the new financial year to about August, there has been a decrease of about 70% in the amount of diesel used compared to this time last year. So yes, the cost drivers indeed are quite a number. There is quite a number of them, including also operational costs.
Okay.
But those are the main ones, Toli, that I will mention for now.
So you will know, Mr. Mkhize, I don't need to try and emphasize this any more than the government of the day has been saying. The cost of living crisis, it is starting to bite. In fact, it is the Minister of Electricity who recently made such a reference in Parliament himself that these increases or these tariff increases are simply untenable. I think that was the word he used. So how does Nersa ensure that these proposed increases are fair and justifiable, particularly for those who simply cannot afford?
Yeah, there is a plethora of matters that are considered, Oli. One of the things that the regulator has to consider in its decision making is firstly that Eskom is a sustainable business, but at the same time, we also need to ensure that the poor, especially the poor, are cushioned from exorbitant prices of electricity. So on the one hand, we need to ensure that Eskom has adequate revenues to be able to run its business. But on the other hand, we have to also ensure that citizens are cushioned. So there is a number of interventions that are in place to protect the poor, such as subsidy. There's a free basic electricity subsidy, which municipalities particularly administer, which then allows people that do not have the means to access electricity. But there is also a tariff that is highly subsidized. It's called the Home Light Tariff under Eskom, which then assists the poor to purchase electricity at much reduced costs that are cross-subsidized by other users of electricity.
Yeah.
So yes, Toli, we have to balance the two. On one hand, ensure that Eskom is sustainable, but at the same time, ensuring that the poor are cushioned indeed.
the last part is actually very important because, as you say, you have to make sure that Eskom remains financially sustainable, whilst at the same time looking after the interests of ordinary consumers. Is that a tricky balance for you, ensuring that Eskom's financial health is not compromised, whilst at the same time trying to temper with whatever increases that they ask for? And by the way, is 36% too high?
Only, what I would say is that when Eskom applies to Nersa for a tariff revision or a tariff application, and I'm deliberately steering away from the use of tariff increase because it's not always, it doesn't always have to be an increase. Of course, we've seen increases in the past, but as I said, for example, with the usage of diesel, because of the current circumstances where the coal fleet has been performing much better this financial year, Eskom has used much less diesel than it did last year. So that is a cost decrease when it comes to the usage of the peakers. So what I can say is that, yes, Eskom has applied for that 36%, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the end result after we have processed the application, that it will be 36%. As you know, Oli, we have to assess Eskom's costs using what we call prudency tests. We have to make sure that whatever they present before the regulator is indeed prudently incurred costs. We are also guided by the law, which in Section 15 of the Electricity Regulations Act says that the regulator can only approve costs that are efficiently incurred. So hence, as you have seen even in the past, whatever Eskom applies for is not necessarily what it gets. So indeed, you mentioned the trickiness of the situation that we are in as Eskom continues to apply for quite high increases, that we always have to grapple with the issue of Eskom sustainability, at the same time making sure that we cushion the poor. And this is becoming more and more tricky, especially with the fiscus also increasingly unable to bail out Eskom as it has been doing in the past.
All right.
So I'll leave it at that.
All right, and unfortunately time is against us, although I would have wanted to squeeze one or two more questions, but we've completely run out of time. Welile Mkhize is the acting executive at Nersa. This is an acting executive for electricity. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tony.